Hey, roommates, we're stepping into the shade room.
Oh, I'm on the screen. Oh my goodness.
Hi, Judith. How are you?
Doing amazing. You know, we just have the first, I don't know, Black woman to be nominated as a VP. Stepping into the shade room. How are you?
It's so good to be with you. It's so good to be with you.
You know, you don't have much time. It's days before the election and you are busy. So we're going to dive into these questions, some of which the roommates wrote themselves.
Okay, good.
Okay. So there's been a lot of controversy surrounding the Biden-Harris tax plan for people who earn $400,000 or more. So we've got celebs like 50 Cent who seem to be against it because, you know, they're in that tax bracket or whatever. But we're seeing a lot of concern on social media. And it's like, the 400K range, that's the top 1%. So we want to know, can you explain this tax increase for those who need clarity?
Yes, I'm making a commitment that we will not raise taxes on anyone making less than $400,000 a year, that we will make sure there are middle-class tax cuts, which include, for example, realizing that, you know, when we look at racial disparities in America, Black families own 1/10 of the wealth of other families. One of the greatest sources of wealth for any American family is home ownership. And that's intergenerational wealth. It gets passed down, right? So what we're gonna do is have a $15,000 tax credit for first-time home buyers to be able to help with closing costs and down payments, which is about fueling our ability to grow the economy through home ownership. We are going to have a system where we say that we're going to invest $150 billion in low interest loans and access to capital for small businesses with a focus on minority owned businesses and Black owned businesses, understanding that that is one of the greatest sources, long-standing sources of economic wealth within the community. And as we know, our small business leaders are also civic leaders. These are the kinds of approaches that we are taking. And, you know, Donald Trump would like to convince folks that helping working families is not in the best interest of everybody. But see, that's because his whole focus has been helping the top 1% and the biggest corporations of America. Donald Trump came into office and passed a tax bill benefiting the top 1% and the biggest corporations in America, which is going to result in a $2 trillion deficit that everybody is going to have to pay for. Joe and I believe when you talk about how is the economy doing, the question really needs to be, how are working people doing? How are working families doing? As opposed to someone asking, how's the economy doing? And the only thing they point to is the stock market and how rich people are doing. That's not how we feel about things.
If the polls are correct, 9 out of 10 Black people are going to be voting for Biden-Harris. In the Black and brown community, there are some people who are a little wary of your past as a prosecutor. So I know you've got some plans to reform the criminal justice system. Can you summarize this for the roomies?
Yeah, no, and first of all, look, people have a valid distrust in the system. I grew up the child of parents who were active in the civil rights movement in the 1960s. There is not a Black man I know, be he a relative or a friend, who has not been the subject of some form of unreasonable stop, unreasonable search, or excessive force. That's just a fact. And it was that same level of distrust about the system that caused me to go inside the system to try and fix it from there. And when I look at my career, it was a career of not only reforming the system with creating some of the first programs that were about getting jobs and support to young men and women who were arrested for drug sales, but it was also about, you know, I prosecuted child sexual assault cases. I prosecuted rape cases. I prosecuted homicide cases. And yes, people went to jail for those things. But when we talk about what we need to do to reform the criminal justice system, I know from the inside how badly it needs to be reformed. And so our agenda includes getting rid of mandatory minimums, decriminalizing marijuana, including expunging the records of people who have been convicted of marijuana offenses, shutting down private prisons, getting rid of cash bail, the money bail system. I've been a leader in the United States Senate on that. Why? Because people are sitting in jail for days, weeks, months, and years simply because they can't afford to get out. That's an economic justice issue as well as a criminal justice issue. So these are some of the things that we will do, including requiring accountability and reform in policing, including banning chokeholds and carotid holds. George Floyd would be alive today if that were the case. We're going to require a national registry for police officers who break the law. Why? Because in many jurisdictions, they may not be prosecuted, but they will be fired. But then they can pick up and move to another jurisdiction and get hired there. So we need to have a registry so that we can track that. And these are some of the things that we are committed to doing. And that is my commitment, to do what I know needs to get done to reform this system and to bring greater equality and equity and accountability. Because, my last point would be this. When we talk about consequence and accountability and consequence in the criminal justice system, that is always a phrase used as it relates to the person who's arrested, and never as it relates to the system itself and the people who work in the system. And there needs to be consequence and accountability and consequence for everybody, including the system itself.
Including the system itself. Big point. Absolutely, because a lot of the roomies were wondering, kind of like what you were saying about the police brutality. Things can be banned. Chokeholds can be banned. Body cameras could be mandatory in some of these counties, but are they going to be held accountable when it's time to take them out?
That's right.
Okay. And we see that you're at Howard University. You went to HU, you're an alumna, and you rep that pink and green. And we have a lot of Shade Room followers, AKA our roommates, that are part of Greek Life. So can you do a shout out for our AKA roomies?
Well, I just want to say to all my sisters in the Divine Nine, including all the members of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, that, our sisterhood is so strong, and, we are guided by our faith, but also a commitment to service, all of the Divine Nine sororities and fraternities. Let me tell you, I've been traveling the country, and as always, members of the Divine Nine are leaders in their communities and have been leaders around just what's at stake in this election, and speaking up and speaking out and pointing out to everybody, what is at stake, and therefore our need to honor our ancestors and vote, knowing that there are so many who shed blood for our right to vote, including, who we lost this year, the late, great John Lewis, who was a member of the Divine Nine. It has been a particular joy for me to talk about the Divine Nine. I was on the stage the night of the Democratic Convention when I accepted the nomination to be vice president as on the Democratic ticket. And I talked about family. And I said, well, my family includes, of course, the people that I was born into in terms of my family and my godchildren and my Divine Nine family. And it was so wonderful. And of course, you can imagine some people were like, what's the Divine Nine? And I was like, you about to find out.
I'm not a part of the Divine Nine. You make me wish I went back to college right now and started pledging.
We're all in it together.
We're all in it together. Let's say the Biden-Harris ticket wins. You guys are all in the White House. You guys are facing quite the hot mess.
Yes.
Okay, there is COVID. We got to figure out, you guys got to figure out the vaccine. You got to figure out how to open up the country again. Maybe that stimulus check.
Yeah.
So the roomies want to know, what can we expect in the first 100 days of a Biden-Harris administration?
So first of all, you hit it on the head. We are in the midst of at least 4 crises all happening at once. Because of the pandemic, we're in a public health crisis where over 225,000 people have died. African Americans are 3 times as likely to contract the virus, twice as likely to die from it. The economic impact, people are parked in food lines, praying they can get to the end of the line before the food runs out. 1 in 5 mothers is describing her children under the age of 12 as being hungry. We're in a hunger crisis. Not to mention a long overdue reckoning on racial injustice in America. Not to mention a climate crisis which is impacting all communities with a particular emphasis on communities of color, which are more likely to be in places with low air quality, for example. So we need to, one, get the pandemic under control. And that means embracing science, being guided by facts, speaking truth to the American people. But also, we will implement our national plan for testing, for free testing, for vaccines, free vaccines. We will make sure that we help small businesses reopen and rehire, but do it in a safe way with federal grants to help these small businesses buy things like plexiglass dividers so they can reopen in a way that they can be safe and their customers can be safe. We need to invest in our schools, and we will triple Title I funding, which are directed at the schools that have the highest need but are in the lowest income communities. There are a number of things that we are going to do that is about reopening, but doing it in a safe way and guided by the public health professionals telling us how we need to actually confront and deal with this virus. Okay.
And so it sounds like there's going to be definitely some aftermath. It's not like, oh, as soon as you guys are, hypothetically elected, the virus just disappears.
Right. No, it's of course not. But here's the thing. We know that Donald Trump knew about the seriousness of this back in January, and he held on to that information. Can you imagine if American families, if small business owners, if teachers knew back in January about the seriousness of this, how people might have been able to plan? And, even after people knew that it existed, we had a president of the United States who was the commander-in-chief of the United States saying this was a hoax, suggesting people shouldn't wear masks. And now look at where we are. And I really do believe this is one of the greatest mass casualty events we have experienced as a country since World War II. And it did not have to be this bad. And that's the point. It did not have to be this bad. But there has not been real leadership. Frankly, we have witnessed the greatest failure of any presidential administration in the history of our country. And that's why we need new leadership. And that's why, I want to urge everyone to please vote and use the power of your voice, which is your vote at election time. Let's not let anybody sideline us when we have so much at stake.
Okay. And with election season just a few days, well, the end of election season is just
that's right.
Right.
That's right.
And, some people haven't voted yet. A lot of people have. Mm-hmm. Is there any statement that you'd like to leave the roommates with?
Your vote is so important. One, it is important, again, to honor the ancestors, all those people who shed that blood for our right to vote, who died for our right to vote. The second reason is that everything is at stake. Everything that could impact you is at stake in this election, be it healthcare and access to healthcare, to are we going to reform these systems that have been informed by systemic racism and racial bias. It is about whether we are going to have an economy that understands that when we're talking about the Black community, our issues are as varied as they are for anybody, and that includes what we need to do to grow access to capital. That's one of my big areas of focus. Education, public education. Joe and I have a commitment to putting $70 billion in HBCUs, understanding that's the pipeline to all of the careers for so many who have become national and international leaders. Everything is at stake. And then my third reason to offer for why it's important to vote is this. All over our country, powerful forces are trying to make it difficult and confusing for us to vote. And you have to ask why. And I believe it is because they know our power. They know our power when we vote. When we vote, things change. When we vote, we win. So let's not let anyone take our power from us. It's so important that everybody votes and vote early. And you can go to iwillvote.com if you want more information on where you can go to vote. You just put in your zip code. But let's make sure our voices are heard. There's too much at stake. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Senator Kamala Harris, for stepping in to the Shade Room. We really appreciate your time.
It's so good to be in the Shade Room. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's great to be with you.